يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It's a Saturday morning and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the program today, to stay with us, keep us company till 10 o'clock. And we do have some interesting topics lined up for you. We're going to be looking at Khadija Taylor's journey into Islam. We're also going to see what the South African Sustainability Seafood Initiative is all about and how you as a household or a housewife can and must make a difference as far as the whole food chain and food security situation is concerned. But first up, we're going to talk to a lovely lady that hails all the way from Stanger. She's here attending a course in Johannesburg. I managed to pin her down and to come in and talk about the work she's doing in her community. She is a ladies and kids empowerment coach, but a lot of focus is on issues around troubled marriages. So if you're in a situation where you feel that your marriage needs a bit of healing, this is the go-to person in the KZN area. So stay with us. Let's see what the lovely young lady Farah Manjoo has to say to us about empowerment, coaching, motivation and working on your marriage. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for joining us, and I can't wait to unpack this issue around troubled marriages. But you're not only a ladies coach, you also work with children.
Yes.
But what happens, I did say that your focus is on troubled marriages. It's not enough to talk to the lady and help her heal and come to terms with her issues. Where does her partner feature? Because he's not going to be hearing the same message.
Yes, correct. So once I do a couple of sessions with the females or the mothers, then I wait until the lady's in a good space and is able to open up freely in the presence of her husband. And then I contact the husband and ask him if he's willing to come in and have a joint session, which I call couples therapy. So they can then iron out and clear the air and be given a platform to express in a safe environment in my presence as a mediator. And then I can then hear through what they are saying, read through their words, their pain, their anger, and the issues then obviously related to the past that are impacting on their present marriage, and then offer them solutions moving forward. In most cases, we need about 4 to 6 sessions, and I work extensively with the lady individually, because I find that women are emotional, so there's a lot of emotional things that we need to release.
Okay, so you talk about 6 to 8 sessions, sometimes even longer, sometimes less is required to resolve the issues. But I should imagine in sessions like this, you don't only do couples counseling. I know that your work is very far-reaching, and we'll try and touch on that a little later on as well. But what happens in a session which becomes very emotional and lots of finger pointing? How do you manage to contain that?
So we have a few house rules when they come in. When things get very heated, I remind them that there's no disclosing of dirty laundry. We're going to keep it simply to the facts and how they're feeling and a way forward. We're going to offer solutions onto the table, not just the going on with the blame game. So I teach them the 3 fingers pointing back rule, so to look more within themselves than looking for fault in their partner. So how they can improve themselves, that's what I focus on.
You call your center the Baraaqa Healing Sanctuary and Learning Center.
Yes.
Is it about healing and learning how you do things differently?
Yes.
How long
correct.
have you been in practice?
3 years now. Prior to this, I used to teach and do different modalities of healing and coaching and empowerment on a part-time level. And I realized that the path of healing and empowerment and assisting people was my calling, and it gave me great fulfillment and satisfaction to do this on a full-time level. And just to correct you with the name, it's Baraaqa. So Baraaqa means the diamond. So the choice of the name Baraaqa was to help people access the inner diamond, whether it's kids, whether it's in a marriage or on an individual level, to help people acknowledge their true value and their worth, their true potential.
Okay, thanks for that correction. Very similar to Baraaqa, and I thought, well, Baraaqa means of blessings
yes.
and very close to
Yes.
what you are doing anyway.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in this type of work? I mean, it must be very emotionally draining as well.
For me, when a client comes in and perhaps walks in crying with a lot of emotional stress and worry, and when they leave out smiling and happy, that is like the highlight of my day. So the positive feedback and outcomes that I get wipes out any type of, drain or fatigue that I may feel after the session. But actually what led me towards finding my career path is myself needing healing, myself needing the therapy, going through life thinking that I was okay, not realizing that there were issues stemming from childhood. So I was in a situation where I was depressed and I did not know. That was during my postpartum depression I had experienced after my second child.
Baby blues.
Yes, it went a bit more than baby blues, and I went to seek healing, and I came across a person that was doing journey therapy, and I found a lot of relief and a new beginning, and I felt lighter and I started seeing things differently, and that's what led me to start studying this field. And the first type of therapy I actually studied was the journey, and I loved it, and I just wanted more and more, and that's when I went on to brain gym, kinesiology, Aafiyah healing, coaching, and the list goes on, and I'm committed to lifelong learning. Any opportunity that I get to learn, I take it, because it's just going to add to my toolbox that I can empower and help other people, but also empowering myself, because I need to uplift myself first before I can assist others.
We know that in this day and age, sadly, lots of marriages, and I guess it's because of the times we're living in, there's a lot of stresses, people's lives are stressful. We work hard, we play hard, we live in a very, very competitive world, and the crack starts manifesting in relationships and marital relationships. Are you seeing more and more of that in your practice?
Yes, initially I was seeing a lot of children and their moms, and I realized that the family unit is not strong enough to support the child, the environment. So they come and receive the healing, but the issues lie with the parents. So I needed to open my vision to allow fathers to step in with their wives, and that's how I can heal the entire family unit. So they can uplift the future generation that way, by healing the marital relationship.
In this day and age, we're in the 21st century, and I've just spoken about this stiff competition all around us. Everybody wants to be winners, everybody wants to be a great success, everybody wants to arrive, and with it comes at a price. As I've said, manifests in marriages, troubled marriages, and troubled relationships across the board. How does all of that stress, it plays out with us not even being aware of it, impact and manifests on our children? What are you seeing?
So if there's a breakdown in the relationship between the father and the mother, then the children pick up on that negativity. And if there's arguments in being addressed and issues being addressed in front of the children, where they're raising their voices and there's doors being slammed and their body language, or the mom sitting and crying, then the child actually takes on that issue and that stress on themselves, and they end up blaming themselves that they are the reason for their parents fighting. And many of the times kids have come to me and asked me, why are they born? Why were they even brought into the world if their parents are not happy? Their parents were probably not happy to have them. So when you hear things like that, it's so important for parents to sort out the issues away from the children, not in the presence.
We're going for an ad break now, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you to give us tips for moms and dads as to how they interact with the children when things are going wrong in their lives, to give their children very positive messages without frightening them, because the first thing that pops into a child's mind when mom and dad are fighting is that they're going to get divorced. So let's talk about the positive messages we can give our children. Farah Manjoo is my guest. She's a ladies and a children's coach, and as you can hear, she focuses a lot on troubled relationships. Don't go away, we're going to be back with more from Farah Manjoo. We're still going to be talking to Khadija Taylor a little later on in the show about her journey into Islam, and then we'll talk to the South African sustainable seafood industry to find out how we can make a meaningful difference in taking care of our environment and the type of foods we ingest. But right now, Farah Manjoo is in studio talking about her work as a coach, very especially around troubled marriages and children. Before the ad break, I asked about the children. Obviously, as you've said, they come to you thinking that they the reason why the parents are having problems.
Yes.
How do you reassure them, or how should parents reassure their children? Tell them what's going on, but without frightening them.
Yes. So the big word divorce tends to be very frightening for children. And a lot of kids who come from troubled backgrounds where the home environment is unstable, and there isn't real open communication where they can ask their parents, what's really happening between the mom and dad and their relationship. So when they open up to me about these issues, I firstly tell them that these are adult stuff, that whatever your mom and dad is, whatever's going on with them, it's got nothing to do with you. They still love you unconditionally. So, because what happens is they tend to feel unloved and they blame themselves that they've maybe caused a problem. And so I reassure them that there's nothing that they have done that has contributed to the issues. So I also coach the parents to reassure them on that level and to tell them that mom and dad is sorting out whatever, we just have a misunderstanding, that we are going to get through it and we are seeking help now. So we are going to be friends again, because a lot of them come to me and say my mom and dad are not friends. So just to use their language, I also say they're going to be friends again. They're going to make up. So things are going to get better.
And when mom and dad are having a difference of opinion or an argument, I know the grannies and our parents always tell us don't have a fight in the presence of the children.
Yes.
But it's easier said than done. You can't kind of take your fight into another room or outdoors. Ideally you should, but things happen in the moment.
So I think what is a good way to move past that is if the fight started in the presence of the children, then you need to make up and make things right in their presence, so that they see that they're friends again and everything's happy and go lucky again. So even if there's more to discuss, you can take that maybe into the bedroom, but in front of the children, just make up and let them know that everything's okay, so they feel secure. Because if you're still screaming and you end off like that, and that's what the children are seeing, they're going to feel like, I'm going to be living with mom or living with dad, and they have all these thoughts going through their minds that makes them feel insecure.
Sadly, sometimes one of the partners are very manipulative, and they would do that deliberately. They pick a fight in the presence of the children just to serve their own devious ends. And it's not easy to time out, hey?
Yeah.
Even if you want to, it's not easy to do that.
Because usually, if the mom and dad is having a problem, they also need an ally. So they need one of the children to back them. So that's the intention of doing that. So if I catch, these games that the parents are playing, from what they tell me and what the children tell me, then I give them advice and I let them write out things that they can do different from their perspective and improve their communication with their partner in front of the children, and how they can do things differently moving forward.
Sadly, and I know that in psychology, it's, you are told time and time again that your children are not your friends. They are your children. You are their nurturers and their caregivers. But invariably, and this again is that manipulative game that people play, is when you're having a serious difference with your partner, you drag in the children, you create allies, or some mothers even dump on their children and reveal all the sordid secrets to those teenage children, or perhaps even younger or older. What's it doing to the children in terms of boundaries being crossed, and also the issue around respect?
Yes, so what happens is the child loses respect for the parent that is being run down. And it's more about taking sides on whose side you are in. So I have to go back to the source, where if it's the mother doing that or the dad doing that, I have to take them separately, individually, and discuss the harms of that and how it's going to emotionally damage the child. And the child will think that's how life is and go on, into a marriage when they grow up doing the same thing. So it's like learned behavior. They pass on these habits onto their children. So I would make them aware of the dangers and how emotionally, overwhelming it is for the child, especially a younger child. They cannot deal with adult stuff. Adults have to sort these issues separately away from the children, and just to reinforce that.
It's a huge burden on the children.
Yes.
And in their selfish state of mind,
they don't realize.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or sometimes they're doing it maliciously. It's, the husband trying to get one up on the wife and vice versa. But it's an absolute no-no.
Yes, but obviously there are issues within that parent that needs to be resolved coming from their childhood. Maybe something similar was done to them, so it's learned behavior, then bringing it into their parenting style. So I would do a journey therapy with something like that that's deep-seated, that's driving their behavior on that level. So I found that the journey is just excellent. I always speak about the journey. That's my favorite type of therapy.
Does that journey therapy taking them as far back into the childhood as possible?
Yes, it's a regression, even not just the initial foundational stages of childhood, also into the womb space where things were brought on via, the legacy of the mom, the grandmother, into the ancestry line.
Intergenerational stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
So belief systems, emotions, vows, so all sorts of baggage, we call it emotional baggage, then even the energetic stuff goes into the fetus, and then we are born with all of these stuff that is not even ours.
So ideally, what should a pregnant mom be doing? What should the pregnant couple be doing So as to prevent this baby being born with all that baggage.
Stuff. Okay, so I do myself, and I had my third child, and I was already having a couple of years of journey therapy, which helped me tremendously. When I decided to have my last born, he's 3 now, Bilal, my husband and I, we sat down with the therapist, and we wanted to clear our emotional energies going into the child, and we did a visualization of some with prayer, with intention, that our emotional stuff from our history doesn't filter into the child. And I noticed that my third child, he was such an amazing baby, and he still is a different child from the other two. Something different took place there, so he was more free. He is very, has no inhibitions, and more full of joy.
So you created a very calm environment.
Yes.
Whilst you were pregnant, and alhamdulillah, it served him and you as a family
Yes.
very well. Let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum, where perhaps when the mom was pregnant, she had a very stressful time. The relationship was very troubled, maybe.
Yes.
And then it carried on. The child didn't do well at school, perhaps. The child is now a grown woman herself, but finds that she's not very stable in her relationships. Is this all of the stuff that played out whilst her mom was pregnant?
Yes. Now, it takes the client a while to access the womb space. So we firstly work on the present issues, and we go into 10 years and 20 years, and we are working through a couple of sessions. We get into the womb space in a deep regression. So what happens is
you do that type of therapy as well?
Yes, yeah. So the journey offers different types of processes that help to access the womb space, and even preconception. So it's just amazing stuff. And I've received great results working with the mum, firstly, who brought the child who had ADD, ADHD issues or other learning problems, and then we tracked with the child that all the issues are coming from the mom. So I had to request to work with the mom, and when she was pregnant with him, she had issues with her in-laws and things like that, and a very unstable marriage.
So it's really about going back into the past, but don't people find it very emotional and hurtful to dig up all the stuff from the past?
Yes. So how we deal with that, the spiritual aspect of the journey, where we invite a spiritual mentor of their choice, so they can bring in an angel, the presence of Allah, or a prophet, or a saint, or a sheikh, and then that makes facing that past painful incident much more easier.
For example, you just say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help me through this journey.
Yes.
It's going to be painful, but be with me
but
every
you
step
feel
of the way.
presence when you're going back in time, because you actually have to face that issue as if you're reliving it. So you need to have that protection.
And how long does it take?
The session, 90 minutes to 2 hours.
2 hours. And how many sessions do you have to go through?
So I have a package of 4 and 6. So that's to start off. And then thereafter, for the maintenance sessions are 2 sessions a month, or 1 session a month. Yeah.
But we as human beings have what is called selective memory.
Yes.
And I can't remember. I couldn't go that far back in time. There's certain memories I have, but I can't even begin to imagine how you're going to untap all of those memories.
It is remarkable, but I tell you, the journey is cellular healing. So we go into cell memories that are trapped in our bodies. So whatever is blocked out, we access that by tapping into the subconscious mind, where all the memories are stored. And the subconscious mind doesn't know much compared to the subconscious mind. We're not aware of those memories. So we somehow, memories of rape or abuse or childhood violence, all of that comes up that they just didn't, deal with.
And once they deal with it in the therapy, they are at peace.
Yes.
You can move on to a better place.
Does
your behavior
freedom
change as well?
It does. There's a shift on all levels, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. Physically, you're releasing from your body those trapped cells that are repressed, and now they're coming up for freedom, and your body actually feels lighter. It's amazing. Myself, I've become so much more confident after the journey therapy. It's like, you know, the sky's the limit. So you access your potential as well.
And is it widely available throughout South Africa? I mean, you're
Yes.
very far away. I can't visit you for journey therapy. I'd like to.
You'll be surprised. I actually have many clients in Johannesburg and Cape Town and everywhere but Stanger. I have limited clients in Stanger, but most of my clients are out of Stanger because I travel between Stanger to Durban. I have 3 offices, one in Stanger, one in Ballito, and one in Baraaqa in Durban. And then I access my clients out of KZN through technology with Skype and Zoom.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. We've run out of time. How do
Yes.
people get in touch with you?
So my website is Baraaqa Healing Sanctuary.co.za, and the spelling of Baraaqa is BARAAQA. And if you have to Google Farah Manjoo, you'll find a lot of information. I'm on Facebook, social media, LinkedIn.
Okay, so, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you indeed for being with us. That was Farah Manjoo taking us to a totally different concept as far as healing is concerned, and it's journey healing. And first time I hear of it, but undoubtedly it seems to work, and probably something new that more and more therapists are going to start embracing. Don't go away. We're going to be talking to someone in the Western Cape about sustainable seafood and how we can play our role in making this a better planet. We're now going to cross over to the Western Cape and look at the state of our oceans. We'll be talking to Parvatri Pillay. She's the manager at SASSI. We'll find out what is it that they're doing, how they're making our oceans cleaner and safer. And before we get there, just as a way of an intro, it is said that we in South Africa consume over 300 million kilograms of fish per annum. So are we depleting our fish resources? If we are, what does the future look like? And when we say future, are we talking 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years down the line? Let's hear what Parvatri has to say about this issue. Parvatri, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Okay, so you're the manager at SASSI. Tell us, what is SASSI all about? What does it stand for? And your link to the World Wildlife Foundation.
Sure. So SASSI is the Southern African Sustainable Seafood Initiative. And it falls under the ambit of the WWF South Africa, which is the Worldwide Fund for Nature. What SASSI is actually a consumer guidance tool that allows consumers to make smart and savvy choices around sustainable seafood and basically seafood they eat every day. SASSI is a very easy consumer guide. It works in the traffic light system, so red, orange, green, and species are listed in those different categories based on their conservation concern. So if a species is listed as green, it means that that species is resilient, the population is doing well, and consumers should go ahead, purchase it, eat it, enjoy it. If it's rated as orange, then there's a little bit of concern around its conservation, and there's a little concern around its fishing methods and the different types of fishing methods that's employed. And usually those species, we tend to ask people, we don't say don't eat it, we say try not to eat it too often. Then the last one are the ones that we're really concerned about, and those are red-listed species. And those are critical conservation concern, and those resources are most of the time completely depleted. So what SASSI does, it provides tools, which is in the form of an app. We have a pocket card. We also have a very functional website. We even have gone as far as an SMS line where you can SMS the species that you want to buy or you want to eat if you're at a restaurant, and it'll send you a response in terms of the sustainability rating of that species. So what this tool does is it puts the power around making a sustainable choice for our oceans and our seafood in the hands of the consumer.
So is the general public abiding by the SASSI initiative, number one? And in terms of, you talk about green, yellow and red, how are we to know which fish is okay to eat? Apart from, let's assume we don't engage with you. Are there any other authorities, supermarkets, restaurant managers, etc., would they then tell us that we don't serve this fish in our restaurant any longer because it's an endangered species? How else can we access the information?
Absolutely. So, apart from the consumer actually actively knowing about SASSI, just to go to the first part of your question, we're very fortunate. A lot of South Africans know about SASSI and they know about the consumer tools. At the same time, we've had a long-standing relationship with 7 of the 9 big retailers. So the Woolworths, the Pick and Pays, the Spar, Food Lovers, etc. And they've actually made public commitments to become sustainable around their seafood. This program is 6-7 years in its running, and it's actually been doing very, very well. And what this means is that these retailers have basically said by a certain target date, we will actually be 100% sustainable when it comes to our seafood. So they communicate regularly with their clients and their shoppers about SASSI. At the same time, SASSI runs a restaurant training program, and particularly with Ocean Basket and John Dory's, which is 2 of the big seafood franchise restaurants. And we get them to actually make commitments around sustainable seafood to train their staff. So you have, as a consumer, have absolute every right to say, what is the status of this species that you are serving in your restaurant? And a trained restaurateur should be able to respond with an appropriate question, or they should know about the tools and they should be able to visit the tools, or the chef should know about SASSI and the chef should be able to answer your question. So what we've tried to do at WWF SASSI is we've tried to intervene at several levels along the seafood supply chain, not necessarily just with the consumers. We're trying with retailers, we're trying with restaurateurs, and then the last port of call is directly with the industry. So we have something called the Responsible Fisheries Alliance, which is a very strange morphed organization because it's a coalition of competing fishing companies that operate in a pre-competitive space to come together to understand how can they fish more responsibly. Because you're right, our oceans are in trouble. 90% of all our commercial fish stocks are overfished or depleted. And yet we're finding an increase in demand for seafood, particularly also in our country.
What does it look like? What does the future look like? Are we in trouble in 5? What's the short and long-term plan in terms of seafood availability? Does it mean that we're going to have to, at some point, import fish into our country? Or are we okay? Are we good to go for at least a couple of years, as long as we obey the rules and eat only the fish in the green category?
Well, we're at that point where that decision is actually quite critical. South Africa is very lucky. We still have fish in our waters. A lot of countries in the Northern Hemisphere have completely fished out their waters. However, the nice thing is that the world is also moving towards more sustainable. People are becoming more informed, more knowledgeable. There's a trend, not just in seafood, towards becoming more ethical and more green. The unfortunate thing is there's always that element of overfishing, and there's always that element of what we call illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing. And that element is something we cannot account for. It's becoming very, very, very virile at the moment. It's particularly in the ocean space because the ocean's so big, you can't really police it beyond certain borders. You can't really monitor it. However, if we are able to keep within the lessons that we know about sustainable seafood, our seafood would last us a really long time. I don't know if many South Africans actually know this, but we already import 50% of our fish. And that's purely, yes, it's purely because our fish gets a better price because it's a better product. So our hake and a lot of our calamari and a lot of our other lionfish is actually sought after by Northern Hemisphere countries because it's a better quality. And we actually import fish from other countries like Argentina and Peru, Patagonia, etc., to basically ensure that we have enough fish to service the South African client. What is interesting is you'll notice is that there's been a steep increase in aquaculture, and that's the actual farming of fish.
So that's a big opportunity for people going forward, entrepreneurs and so forth, to go into the fish farming industry. But also, can you tell us which are fish that are in the green category? So I know if I go and buy fish today, that I am doing the right thing and buying the fish that you're not endangered fish. So if you can mention a few fish, the few types in the 3 different categories, so that we know where we stand, and also what's the position as far as South Africa's #1 favorite fish is concerned, and that is prawns.
Oh, that's a loaded question, but I'll start with your first one. So we're very fortunate. We've got a really nice long list of green-listed species. Our hake, which is fantastic, is not only green-listed, it's also MSC certified, which means it has an eco-label, which means it is certified through an independent body for sustainability. Some of the other South African favorites that are green-listed is kinglet, which is caught by longline fisheries, our mussels, black mussels, our oysters, a lot of our mackerel species. So if you like mackerel, that's also green-listed. Our East Coast spiny lobster is green-listed. And then there's also Cape bream, which is a very popular fish in the Western Cape. It's often called Hottentot, but its proper name is actually Cape bream, which is also green-listed. And those species are definitely South African favorite. When it comes to prawns, however, most of the prawn species, unfortunately, are orange or red listed. And the reason, the reason for that is that prawns, it's not so much the actual animal, but it's how it is caught. So prawn fishing is very destructive. 75% of a prawn catch is actually thrown away. Only 25% is prawns.
Is it thrown away, Parvatri?
It's discarded.
Why?
Because they can't use it and it has no commercial value.
Okay, we've got about, 2 minutes to wrap up time. I'd just like to ask this question. We know that all around the world there's been a lot of hype around the pollution, very especially plastics. And the suggestion is also that the fish are ingesting the plastics and we in turn are ingesting the fish, so we're getting that plastic into our systems as well. What's the condition like with our fishing in South Africa and the fish we are consuming, and the condition of our oceans?
All right, so unfortunately, plastic is quite ubiquitous in that it is across all our oceans. At the moment, we're looking at about depositing 8 million metric tons of plastic into the ocean per year. So now to break that number down for you, it's 1 dump truck of plastic per minute entering the sea. So what we're finding is that turtles are eating the plastic, dolphins, whales, some big species of fish are eating little bits of plastic. And while we don't have scientific evidence of it actually entering humans, it has the potential to do so because it will eventually get into the species that we're eating. South Africa is not exempt. Recent research showing that we rate as the 15th worst polluter. Which is bad news for us.
Absolutely.
And it's purely because we have a really poor waste management system and we overconsume on single-use plastic. That's 2 kilograms per person per day uses a single-use plastic and then disposes of it.
Okay, my final question, Parvatri, my final question, sorry for the interruption, is can you just mention 2 or 3 very quickly fish on the endangered list that we should not even consider consuming or buying?
Absolutely, there's a lot. But the ones that most commonly people find are what they call cob.
Yes.
Or in South Africa, lots of people call it kabeljou.
Right.
All of those species are red listed. A lot of the mussel crackers are the ones you'll catch on line. So mussel cracker, a lot of your basses, some of your pig stump nose, and then obviously there's the ones that you wouldn't normally buy, And those are your West Coast shark lobster, which is crayfish or crayfish as it's popularly known.
Okay.
So, yeah, and unfortunately South Africa's national fish, which is the gudgeon, is also red listed.
Ooh, that's bad news for us, but unfortunately that's where we have to leave it. But you have given us a great overview. At least we do know what is safe for us to eat from the green list, and let's make ourselves more savvy. Can we visit your website? Will there be more information on the website?
Absolutely. Everything is available on the website, including where you can download the app. And I can give you the website, which is www.org.za/SASSY.
Great, thank you indeed, and I have no doubt that our viewers are going to go to the website, get all of the necessary information, and become very savvy, smart, and responsible seafood consumers. You have yourself a great day.
You too, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right, let's go for our next ad break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to a sister about her journey into Islam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and welcome back to the program. We're now going to be talking to Sister Khadija Taylor, and she's here to tell us her story of her journey to Islam. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Khadija.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
I've just been dying to hear your story. Your journey to Islam, you have embraced the deen for the past 12 years?
No, for about the past 7 years.
The past 7 years?
Yes.
And obviously you have children from a previous relationship
yes.
who are not Muslim.
Yes.
How did this journey start for you, and what were your thoughts about Muslims before you decided to look into the deen and decided that this is for me?
Okay, so I never ever had any negative thoughts about Muslims, not at all, because obviously, you know, when I was young, we used to shop at all the Muslim shops. We used to go to the Oriental Plaza, Krugersdorp, where I was actually born and brought up, had a lot of Muslims. I always found them very polite, okay, very, very nice people. But what I realized after I became a Muslim, that none of them ever told us about Islam. And of course, you know, in schools you are not taught the history of Islam. Islam never comes into it. So I do find that there is, in our school, you know, curriculum, a lot of the schools are very Christian. Okay, so you never really taught to actually explore other religions. So you would keep to your mainstream Christianity. But what actually happened to us as a family? We were delving into the Hebrew and Greek languages.
Languages to learn an additional language, or
No,
were you just...
We were delving into, and I think that's an important question, because we delved into the Hebrew and Greek languages because of our intense study of the Bible. And I also found there was this intense love of the Old Testament, which you'll find a lot today. A lot of the Christians negate the Old Testament completely. And we had this intense love. I, as an individual, had this intense love for the Old Testament. I loved history, and you know, the prophets. When I talk about the prophets in context of Christianity, and of course in context of the Bible, I had a great fascination. To me, they were my heroes. They were wonderful, wonderful stories of what they accomplished, what they did, how they were leading people. And so that was a deep fascination for me. And of course, you know, I grew up into my early teenage years to keep in the mainstream of Christianity. But the more that
But following the New Testament, not the Old Testament.
Following the New Testament, but also reflecting on the Old Testament. And with our research into the Hebrew language and the Greek languages, we as a family started to realize that the Christianity that is being taught today is completely incorrect. Because the words that people had translated into the New Testament, and when we actually went back to those words into the Hebrew, the Aramaic, into the Greek languages, they meant something completely different. So as a family, and really credit goes to my brother, as a family, we started to say, well, okay, we've got to find people who practice this original Christianity. And so we started to, search for groups of Christians that might believe the same as us, which then led me to actually study with a Hebrew scholar, which really took us into the Hebrew language. And the more we were delving into this, the more we were realizing that, Christianity is not for us.
That was you as a family that came across this realization that the New Testament is not the original scriptures.
Yes.
What did you do with that information? Did you feel it was perhaps your responsibility to go back to your church and to tell your pastor or whoever to bring it to their attention? Because this is what we as Muslims, as you now know, we as Muslims believe that the New Testament has absolutely no validity.
Yes.
That obviously everything is contained in the Old Testament. And as you will also know, which I'm sure you'll come to, is that we as Muslims are also of the Abrahamic faith.
Yes. Yes, we did. We did go back to our pastors. There were many debates. I was young, so I had a certain amount of say, but it was really just my brother who took the lead in this. And we had debates, we pointed out certain things, we asked for questions, we asked questions hoping that we would find answers. And what actually happened was we couldn't find the answers,
And how were you feeling at this point? Were you really disillusioned? Was that beginning to set in?
No. I was actually very excited.
Still on a quest for more knowledge.
I was so excited that we had found, this jewel, and, I was very excited about this. But what actually happened was, my brother, we were born in Krugersdorp, as I mentioned, and my brother there were lots of Jews in Krugersdorp, so my brother went to the rabbis in Krugersdorp. And the more he spoke to the rabbis about the Hebrew language and the Old Testament and the Torah, the more he became very fascinated with becoming a Jew. So he went on the path of Judaism. What actually happened to me was I was looking for something that was a lot more inclusive. I just felt that there wasn't enough spirit, there wasn't enough heart in Judaism. And I then came across Hinduism. And I thought, this is very fascinating. So I was drawn to, when I say Hinduism, I was drawn to Eastern mythology. And a lot of New Age thought came into it. So I was also drawn to the New Age thought, the positive thinking, the good self-esteem, that sort of thing. So that fascinated me. And so my family, my parents, my brother, mostly my brother, who really actually became a very religious Jew, I took a different path completely. And I went in this journey into Eastern mythology and I then eventually moved into an ashram, and I spent about 18 years in the ashram. I lived with very, very spiritual people. The ashram that we lived in, and I lived all over the country in these ashrams, traveled to India many times, and what I loved so much about that was that we couldn't mix with the males. There was a separation. I took a pledge of celibacy, and I moved into the ashram. I obviously got divorced. Then I moved into the ashram, and I lived with people who were wanting to inculcate values, people who were wanting to make a difference.
So what happened to your children at this point? You divorced. I know you have 3 children.
Yes. So I actually left my home and my family behind, and I moved into the ashram.
And absolutely no regrets for the 18 years that you had adopted this new faith of yours, in leaving your children behind and finding your truth, perhaps?
You know, yes, I think it wasn't an easy journey. But my whole dream, my whole vision was, no matter what I did in my life, I was going to find God. And I would find God. Even if it meant that I went and stayed in the Antarctica on my own, if that's what it was required, I was determined to find God. And having been in my first marriage, it wasn't a spiritual marriage. It was very involved in the world and lots of parties and, you know, alcohol and all of this. And I had to eventually make a stand and say, I don't want this. I cannot live this life anymore.
All right, let's go for our first ad break. When we come back, we'll continue on your quest for God, for peace, for inner peace and for beauty.
Thank you.
Khadija Taylor is my guest. She's talking about her journey into Islam. Fascinating story. Stay with us. We'll be back with you after the ad break. We're listening to the fascinating story of her journey into Islam, and that is Khadija Taylor, born and brought up in Krugersdorp on the West Rand, but of course been through amazing journeys and changes in her life when she finally found the truth, and that truth was, Alhamdulillah, Islam. Now, you then divorced your husband, left your children, and went onwards into your journey, this quest to find the truth. How did you feel about your children? Were they not angry at you? Did they not think you were being selfish, leaving them with your ex-husband and going to find your truth elsewhere in the world?
You know, it's a very important question, but I really had to weigh up having to leave my children with the man I was married to. He was a very good father. And he was wealthy, he stayed in a big home. And one of my thoughts was, I can take them with me, but I know that I'm going to have to downgrade everything. And it is going to be difficult for them. So I tried to explain, well, you know, this is why I'm doing it. But nobody gives you a medal. It was a very, very difficult journey. And I think my children were angry. They felt abandoned, but I spent a lot of time with them in my journey of spirituality. I spent a lot of time, gave them as much quality time and quality conversations about life, values, spirituality, God.
And how strong is that relationship with your children? They're all grown adults. They've gone on to marry and have families of their own now.
We all have a very good relationship, okay? And you do have your ups and downs, but we have a very good relationship. I have a very good relationship with them now. And so it's good.
Let's backtrack. You were now in the ashram. you devoted your life to this life or the sanctuary.
Yes.
You went into a life of celibacy, and you literally gave up on everything in life.
Yes.
Did you think that this was your happily ever after?
I did think it was my happily ever after. I really did. And what actually... Yeah.
What went wrong?
Okay, yes. What actually took me out of this whole environment was I had a bit of a family crisis. My mother was quite old. She was 83 then, and she was on her own because my brother had gone to live in Jerusalem. By this time, he had actually gone to follow his spiritual journey. And so I felt responsible for taking care of my mom. And so what I had to make a decision that I had to move out of the ashram, take care of her. But I also had to think very deeply about my own journey, and I had to say, if the ashram, if this environment determines your spirituality, then you've really achieved nothing. Okay, so spirituality is really...
Because, what were you thinking at the time? You're not here, man is not an island.
Yes.
You've got to be here to be serving and uplifting the rest of mankind.
Yes. And so my journey out of this whole ashram was because of my mother. So I took on the task of actually caring for my mother. And this was, it took me right out of it. But what I do want to say is it wasn't easy. It was a difficult journey to actually withdraw yourself from the spiritual environment, because all of a sudden you realize that you can't fit back into the world, and you don't want to go back to that particular spiritual environment. You know you can't. You have responsibilities. And so it was quite interesting. I'd spent, it must have been about 3 years of, deep searching within my own life. I spent a lot of time fasting and praying, and having dealt with positive thinking and how the brain reacts to positive thinking. So I had created this very powerful vision of myself and where I was going in life, and my whole positive image, and all of a sudden you find yourself, you don't have this. It's all like, well, you can't fit back into the world and you don't want to go back there. So what actually happens? And
and of course you realized at the time that is not what you were searching for.
Yes.
Because you totally cut off from the rest of the world.
Yes.
And
no more is it relevant. No more is it practical. The world needs something else. And I also had to grapple with the thought, as much as when I moved out, as much as I felt a sense of freedom, I really also had this feeling that God had abandoned me. And I kept on having these conversations. How could I have spent so much time, renounced my family, spent so much time in this environment, and now
you've got nothing out of it.
I've got nothing out of it.
But then how did your family respond to your homecoming? And were you ever worried about judgment from them and the community, perhaps? Because that must have happened.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. But perhaps if I can just go back to my culture, in the white community, we don't really worry about what the community is going
to say. What the next person's doing.
That's why we do what we do, which can be so extreme. We don't really worry. And yes, there probably was judgment. There was judgment from the day I left my home.
Because in a sense, you had rejected your family in your quest for answers, the universe, God, and all of that. So you actually abandoned or rejected them. And now that you needed to come back into the real world, albeit to take care of your mom, you're actually going back to them.
Yes.
And it was about coming together and perhaps asking for forgiveness.
You know, I personally did not ask them for forgiveness because my intention was to find God. If I had asked them for forgiveness, I would have then negated my journey to find God.
But you didn't find God at that point.
I know, but there is a journey that is happening here, and this is what I want to just share with you. Because in the moments when I had this dream, this vision to find God, and when I had felt abandoned, what I want to share with your viewers is we as humans, we do want to dream, and we try to create our dream. But our dream is so limited to what the dream that God has for us, the vision that Allah has for us, is so completely huge. So in this moment when I really had to deprogram myself from my own vision, my own dream, I still had to have enormous faith, which I never let go of. And it was leading up to, yes, I had reconnected with my family, but just also remember within the ashram, I had spent a lot of time with them. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just like this complete, hello, here I am, haven't seen you for 18 years. So I had to reconnect with them. And I must say they were very, very empathetic. They were very supportive. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because I want you to hold that thought. Because I then decided I need to do something creative. So I joined an art class. And I loved geometrical designs and I loved symmetry designs. So I was in this art class with all these, experienced artists who were painting landscapes and wildlife and I was trying to get to grips with the design that I was trying to create. And what,
out of your head,
out of my
in
head,
your mind's eye.
Yes, I had delved a little bit into sacred geometry, so I loved all the interconnective patterns within geometry. And then one day my teacher said to the class, well, I want you to do a presentation on the artist that influences you the most. You need to do a presentation. I want the theory and the history of that artist. And I thought, well, there is no artist that influences me. A lot of the students in the class, there was Van Gogh, there was O'Keeffe, there was, I can't even remember their names now, but so I went home and I thought, okay, so what do I do? How do I do this? I want to do this presentation. And at this point, I Googled geometrical designs. And to my fascination, this was my journey into Islam. So to my fascination, I had come across Islamic geometry, symmetry, architecture, mathematical equations of how the masjids were built, how they were designed, and I was absolutely bowled over by this.
And let's hold that thought. Khadija Taylor is my guest. She's talking about her journey into Islam, and we'll talk more after this ad break. And into our last segment for the day, on a very positive note, a sister's journey into the Mubarak Deen of Islam. Back to you, and Google came up with a whole host of amazing information for you.
Absolutely.
What was the one thing that caught your eye?
I think because I loved architecture, drawing, design, the one thing that caught my eye was really how the Muslims had actually designed their masjids, their mathematical equations they put into these designs, into the architecture, into the way they painted, the actual symmetry of the actual paintings. So I thought, okay, this is obviously what I've got to present on. And I went off to exclusive books and I bought beautiful books on the actual history of Islam. And this is what I want to say. It's not just you go in and you buy a book just on the architecture. What I had realized is that Islam is not only a religion, but it's also a civilization.
And an absolute way of life.
Yes, so what actually happened was, it had now, I loved history. So I was looking at the history of the civilization, which I had never come across, but had studied most of the civilizations. And so I came across the civilization that was thriving, that had such magnificent minds and heroes, while the world was actually in the dark ages. And I thought to myself, my Lord, where have you been? And this just purely by chance, I was sitting flicking through, I was watching TV and I was flicking through the channels, and I had come across a UK channel that was hosting Cat Stevens.
Yusuf Islam.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we were young, Cat Stevens was our we really liked Cat Stevens, and he disappeared. Mm-hmm. So we debated that. Some said he became a Muslim, some said he became a Buddhist, and I listened to his journey, which was so similar to mine. And I listened and I thought, this is what I want.
So how did you source the people to help you through the journey in taking the Shahada?
Okay.
What was your next step?
Okay, so I listened to this program and I said to myself, that is what you want. You want to become a Muslim. So because my mother had taken me to the Oriental Plaza when I was young, I thought, well, the Muslims are in the Oriental Plaza,
Right.
I'll find Muslims. And yes, I went off to the Oriental Plaza, and I just remember walking into a shop called Help Make Crop. And I said, I'd like to become a Muslim. And the poor person standing there, I think he almost passed out, And then, so he sent me to somewhere else. And then I went to somewhere else and walked into that shop and said, I'd like to become a Muslim. And they said, well, call this person. So I called this person. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm in the game reserve, I can't help you. And a few days went by, I called him again and I said, you got to help me. And he was like, okay, call this person. And
so 6 hits later, you found the person that was going to hold your hand through this journey.
And yes.
Who was it, and how did they take you through?
Okay, so that was the Imam's wife, okay, because I landed up outside Greenside Mosque.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and I was standing outside and I thought, well, the first Muslim that comes out, I'm going to talk to them. So a brother came out the masjid and I said, I want to become a Muslim. And he looked at me and said, Shoo. He said, you know what, the Imam is praying at the moment. But then a woman came and she said, can I help you? I said, yes, I'd like to become a Muslim. And she said, right, call this number. And I called this number and it happened to be the number of the Imam, his wife. So I went and I saw her and she then said to me, okay, well, I have to ask my husband.
All right, just pressed for time, so I'm going to rush you on here.
Yes.
The actual taking of the Shahada, how long after did that happen?
That was a few days after, took Shahada and knew 100%. This is
and
it.
what other resources did you go to speed you up to understand, the etiquette as far as being a Muslim is concerned, and just how to interact with the rest of the community?
Okay.
Did you have a big group of supporters to
No.
hold your hand through
No.
the...
No, so a lot of my research was done online, and I bought a lot of DVDs, I bought a lot of books, and really, that was my source of education. And it was because I had actually stayed in Randburg. I couldn't find any mosques near, I couldn't find any Muslims near me.
How many years ago was this?
This was about 7 years ago.
Okay, I'm sure you're pleased to say that things have changed greatly, that resources are very easily available.
Yes.
There are lots of support groups for reverts and I suppose Muslims that have had a very basic education. So I think if you Google, you'll find all of that. So these were all of your challenges, but through all of that, you saw the beauty of the deen.
Oh, absolutely. Islam is filled with beauty. It's filled with beauty, and I think that is really what draws me to Islam. One of the facets. I also find, as much as it might not seem out there to the world that it's practical, but I find that Islam is extremely practical, because when you hear that you've got to do something, you just understand, yes, it's practical.
And there's very common sense or practical reason for why you have to do it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was just sharing now with someone in your waiting room, as much as you might think, because we cover up that we are oppressed, but it gives us a sense of internal freedom.
And absolutely very liberating.
Yes,
you don't have to be
totally.
a slave to the Western world
Yes.
and to fashion dictates.
Yes.
How did your family respond to this? And are you able to show them the beauty of Islam?
I think I remember when I told my oldest son, I said to him, and we need to meet. So we went off for a drive, and I said, Matthew, I have to tell you that I've now become a Muslim. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, could you not rather have become a Jew?
Why?
He said to me, this is a very, very chauvinistic religion.
So that's how the West views Islam.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oppressive, submissive, chauvinistic,
yes.
etc.
Yes. And then, of course, when I spoke to my daughter who lives overseas in London, and she said to me, but Mommy, the Muslims that I interact with are very badly behaved. Are you sure you want to become a Muslim? And I said, yes, I am sure of it. And so it has been a journey to really deprogram them and to talk to them about the deen.
Well, I think that because you're a Muslim and you badly behaved doesn't mean that all Muslims are bad. You can't make that generalization.
No.
And the same can be said for any other nationalities and other religions.
Yes.
So you can't give a bad rap just because you've had one bad experience with a Muslim. But by and large, how is your journey been up to now? Are you still very at peace that you have found your answers and that this is your answer?
Definitely. So I think as reverts, it's a lonely journey. And my advice to reverts is find ways to sustain yourself, because you are going to spend many hours on your own, many days on your own. So you got to find ways in which you can sustain yourself, believe in yourself, and yes, you've got to move forward.
Well, the good news is that I interviewed some young girls last week. I think they call themselves Muslim 101 or Young Muslims 101. And there are many such support groups springing up all over the country and all over the world.
Yes.
So you don't need to feel alone. And I think we as the larger Muslim community are always very excited and very pleased to hear that there's a new Muslim that has come into the fold. And we embrace you with open hearts and open arms. don't feel alone. We are there. All you need to do is give us a call or knock on our doors.
Absolutely.
So we're not as closed off as people think we are. I think we want to respect your boundaries. So people shouldn't think that we don't want to include new reverts or reverts into the community.
Absolutely.
It's just about respecting boundaries. Time to wrap up. One beautiful pearl of wisdom as far as Islam is concerned that you'd like to share with our viewers.
I think the whole thought of that there is only one God is the most liberating thought that one can have, because the world out there presents many gods to you. So to me, what I really loved was, and which I was so thankful for, which was there's only one God. So that I hang on to, and that I really think about so deeply, constantly. And what I do want to share in terms of the actual community, to become a Jew, it took my brother 4 years to become a Jew. It took a family friend 8 years to become a Jew. And it takes us a few minutes.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Shukran very much for sharing your story with us. It's a very personal story, but of course it's nice to hear these stories and for us to be even more welcoming of people like yourself into our hearts, into our homes, into our community. Shukran once again. Go well and remember us in your du'as.
Amen.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for being with us. We do hope you've enjoyed the discussions as much as we've enjoyed your company. A big thank you to the production team, and as always, take care on the roads. Till the next time, as always, it is Khudafez from me, Julie Ali.
Ya hala, 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 ya hala. يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا